Intel's 480 processor benchmark found Core i9-13900KF the best for overclocking. If you know what you're doing and are willing to take the time to research, overclocking is still a great way to squeeze out a little extra power, while improving performance for virtually no cost. You should also know which silicon to choose for overclocking. Igor's lab employees tested about 500 Raptor Lake processors, including Core i9-13900K, Core i9-13900KF, Core i9-13700K, Core i7-13700KF, Core i5-13600K, and Core i5-13600K. All of these processors have unlocked multipliers indicated by the letter K in the model number, and the F designation means that Intel has disabled integrated graphics, also known as IGBU. We can only imagine how long it will take to thoroughly test the overclocking potential of several hundred processors. Instead, Igor's lab decided to use the Silicon Prediction (SP) feature, which is present in the Asus ROG and Strix family of motherboards. In this case, they used the Asus ROG Maximus Z790 Hero motherboard. This function estimates the minimum processor voltage required for each frequency on the voltage frequency curve. It is known as the V/F curve. Using this data, the motherboard processes the stored values and outputs the SP value. The higher the value, the better the quality of the silicon, at least in theory. And of course, higher quality silicon usually provides better overclocking performance. This is not an exact science and is not a real substitute for exhaustive practical testing of each individual processor. But when you're dealing with 480 processors, exhaustive testing can take a very long time, possibly months. Other challenges include improvements that may be introduced and future steps, the specific motherboard used, BIOS updates, cooling, and so on. The site also notes that the absolute SP values themselves are not comparable between Core i9, Core i7, and Core i5 SKUs. The reason for this is the different V/F curves and stored value constants that Asus uses to calculate SP on its motherboards, depending on the CPU type. The i5-13600K with SP100 does not have the same clock potential as the i7-13700KF with SP100 or the i9-13900K with SP100, noted in Igor's lab. However, in the end, it was the Core i9-13900KF that shows the best SP values, followed by the Core i9-13900K. After that, there was a slight decline with the remaining 4 SKUs. The Core i9-13900KF scored an average score of 101.1, while the non-F model was just behind it with 99.6. It's also worth noting that the worst score of the Core i9-13900KF was 91, which surpasses the average of each lower-end processor. Starting with Core i7, there is a significant drop in ratings. According to the data above, the average SP score of the Core i9-13900KF was about 21% higher than that of the Core i7-13700K. In addition to the caveats we've already mentioned, we should also note the inconsistency of the processors tested. Approximately 2-3 times more Core i9 processors were tested than Core i7 and Core i5. Who knows how testing more chips would make a difference? Data shows that the more you spend on a processor, the better its overclocking potential in the Raptor Lake lineup. However, this doesn't say anything about the value proposition. On Amazon, you see a price tag of $574 for the Core i9-13900KF versus $320 for the Core i5-13600K. That's the $254 price difference between the two chips that had the highest and lowest average SP values in this review. However, things get more complicated when comparing SP values for different product categories. Perhaps the main conclusion is that choosing a cheaper KF model with disabled graphics does not have a big impact on the overclocking potential, if we take these figures as correct. In general, we recommend that you treat this test more as interesting information, rather than as a purchase guide, Whether you plan to overclock or not,